Welcome to The Change Lead, the podcast providing leaders with the insight needed to get things done in a rapidly changing and complex world. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. Connect with our community of like-minded leaders on our website, thechangelead.com. Welcome to The Change Lead with your host, Babatope Ipiyumi.
Hello and welcome. This is Babatope Ipiyumi from The Change Lead, and welcome to another episode of the Change Lead podcast. My guest today is a chief product owner. His career as a product owner started before the term product owner was an industry-accepted role. My guest today is Jonathan Underwood. Jonathan has a global career spanning programming, project management, product ownership, customer management, and executive leadership. Jonathan has a passion for user focus and product quality. He's had the opportunity to successfully deliver solutions into clients like Google, Cisco, and Apple. Today, Jonathan and I will have a conversation about the critical role of product owners in leading change. So, Jonathan, thank you very much for accepting to do this. I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're going to have today, and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. Great to be here.
Thank you. I think it would be good to start the conversation by framing the role of the product owner in the modern organization. Okay, so if I go with my lens, as a change practitioner, a lot of times what I have to do with organizations is define and clarify roles and responsibilities. So who does what? And time again, what I've found is the product management team almost always, and it's called different things in different organizations, product manager, product owner, but that team always seems to have the lion's share of responsibilities. So the question really is, in the modern organization that we have today, how central is the role of the product owner? And also, is there a risk that we're expecting too much from these people we refer to as product owners?
Wow, you do start with the big questions, don't you, really? I think, look, first of all, we've got to clarify, my own experience comes from that of building software. And so I recognize there are product owners out there that are looking after oranges, for example, for supermarkets, and they probably have a very different skill set to what I'm familiar with, but certainly from a technology point of view, yeah, you're absolutely right. Product is central to so many things, and yet product hasn't really been around that long. I think that we've got to define exactly what product management is to start with, and for me, that can be encompassed in a number of different categories, really. I mean, what's first? First is product management is a communication channel, and that includes across all stakeholders, across all of the business. And that's probably why it feels like it's all invasive everywhere, because we are challenged to actually go and meet everybody, hear everybody's view, try and communicate other views to other people, and ask questions. And that's really the next thing. We start to challenge. Once we actually understand all the different requirements from different stakeholders, then of course product management is about how do we prioritize those things and organize those items. And again, there's lots of challenges there with different types of stakeholders. As far as I'm concerned, product management also documents those details and it works with technology to make sure those are delivered. But I suppose that really encompasses what product management is as a whole. And it always, comes to mind that, I've always questioned really who owns the product. And you hear of the term product owner, the product director, the product manager, all these people. But in reality, no individual necessarily, obviously it depends on the size of the business, but no individual actually owns the product. Product management, the whole product management is all about understanding all of the stakeholders, understanding all of their views and formulating a direction and prioritization across those views. So really I would almost say the product team doesn't necessarily own the product at all. And sort of expanding that while we still continue on what is product management and product ownership. Well, what are the different roles? You've got things like head of product or directors or the product owner or the product delivery manager or the product manager or the business analyst within product. Each one of these roles has a different part to play in that sort of overall communication and moving things forward, prioritizing, delivering. And a lot of that depends on the size of the company. So, I've personally had experience where literally I'm the one-man band in a tiny company that's literally documenting everything, doing everything, and yet also driving some of the strategy with the owners and the key stakeholders. I mean, that's a long-winded way to sort of ask about, is product central to a modern organization? So absolutely it is. It is a funnel in which all of the stakeholders get their views and get their imprint into the delivery structure of any particular piece of technology. Now, you did actually give a second part to that question, which is, do we expect too much? I think personally that just depends on the scale. As I say, there's one-man band. I've worked in the big, large corporates, the global businesses as well, and of course, you need, in the tiny organization, you need somebody that's actually got the skills to move across all of those different roles. Whereas in the larger organizations, you simply need to apply the right structure and get the right people in the right roles in order that product is not expected to do too much, because you actually have the ways of those different roles and difference in nuances between those roles working together to actually drive everything forward. And look, there's loads of ways of handling that as well, different matrices of responsibility and roles, etc. And once the team starts growing, of course, you've not got the communication problems of the business, but you've got the communication problems inside the product organization as well. How do you cope with all of those things with specialists in different areas, and be they technical specialists as opposed to business specialists, there are lots of modern ways of achieving this. For example, I'm a great fan of the tool Slack, and using Slack channels as communication channels between everybody in the team at different ways, so you can follow and track different conversations. But do we expect too much? I think it really is such an open-ended question. I can't really answer succinctly. It's just a challenge, but of course, with structure and with scale, you can overcome some of those things.
Indeed. I think, and I like the way you describe it as product owners being communication channel, and different organizations, the context is different. So these are context specific challenges. I think that's a very way of describing it, actually. If we look at, because I think if I use the term that communication channel, the product owner being a communication channel, I've had the opportunity to work with people who I'll say they're very good at doing that. They've been very good at being brilliant communication channel, or they'll be good at being the communication channel between all the stakeholders. So these are good product owners, good product managers.
Yeah.
How, or what advice would you give to someone who's a product manager today, who wants to become a great product manager, who wants to be really good at becoming very good at being this communication channel across all stakeholders?
Yeah. Oh, it's oh goodness me, it's again such an interesting question you give me. So look, I personally believe that experience is really what makes a product manager. And obviously experience is simply time and variability of the work you've actually done, because it is such a central part to any project. The more that somebody can actually bring experience and say, I kind of know how that's going to happen, so I know who I need to talk to. I kind of know how this is going to happen, so I need to know to bring these people together and get them talking. So that experience actually builds up. But I do think, that obviously takes a lot of time. And I also think there are two distinct types of product owners. There's the technical people and there's the business focused people. And often I find, the business focused people are more communicative. They're able to sort of get their ideas across better. They can talk the business language, and the stakeholders like that. But you can't just get away with that. You have to have the technical knowledge. You have to be able to talk to the developers about their own needs. And quite often the business is so driving forward with this is what we want, this is what we want, this is what we want. We almost forget the fact that technology dates so quickly in today's world. And in fact, really it's the technology stakeholders that are actually trying to push that, well, we need to update this. We've got this is going out of date now. There are better ways of doing this. And we need to keep reinventing what we've already, sort of made in that particular case. So, there is this tech and business divide. And I think the best product management people that I've ever met really have both of those sides. They're able to jump between. I remember very early on in my career, CEOs sort of picking me out and saying, goodness, you can talk binary and English. We're going to put you in front of customers. And in fact, it was literally that quote that really started my product career. But it is very true. Again, it's all about communication in that case between technology and business. And funnily enough, a personal feeling is that it's easier to go from a technical background and expand your business knowledge, much as I have, as I've created, as I've got bigger roles and gone into bigger projects, etc. I've just expanded my business knowledge, but fundamentally, I started as a programmer talking bits and bytes. So I, but to go from the other side as a sort of consultant, understanding business practices and processes, and then trying to talk to the developers about data models, that I believe to be more challenging. But unfortunately, I don't think there is a silver bullet, or golden, way of making a product manager great. I think it just comes down to experience and being able to communicate that difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. So basically, you learn by doing it. You don't. Yeah. You need to pick up the skills over time, and appreciate the fact that it's all a journey and everybody's learning.
And yeah, I mean, there's expertise everywhere. So that doesn't mean that someone can't become a fantastic product owner or a product manager dealing specifically with user experience capabilities, for example. So there's always the specialisms, but to become that rounded product person that's capable of becoming a product director or ultimately a CPO type role, then that does take the full gambit.
Yeah, I like that phrase you said, being able to speak binary and English. It's a brilliant quote. I'll document that and make sure I can reference that at some point.
Cool.
I'll give you credit, but I'll reference it. I think at the beginning you mentioned Scrum, because you did refer to the fact that what you're doing is in the space of software development.
Yeah.
So the term product owner comes from the word Scrum. So that's where we got the term. So in Scrum, we have these three formal roles of the product owner, the Scrum master, and everybody else being part of the development team.
Sure.
And that's where we get. And before then, the role was being performed. We probably call it a business analyst or a technical analyst, going to the reference of people being more on the technical side or the business side, or even product manager. So when you think about that, it looks as though the role product manager or product owner has evolved over time, just as technology has evolved over time as well. And I think you probably have a very unique vantage point to see that evolution, given the way your career has developed. So is there any way you can describe or explain, or, expose that evolution of over time of the product owner role?
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right. I'm very lucky. I always I feel very, very lucky. All of the opportunities that have been presented to me, and but funnily enough, it did literally start with that quote we mentioned, talking binary and English, because at the time I was quite happily programming machine code and heading a screen all day 24/7. But it was really that quote and being dragged in front of customers that expanded my my vision of what was going on. And this was in the 90s, so very much in the 90s we were creating new languages. I was still looking at a DOS prompt in my first jobs, programming Pascal and those sorts of languages. But I think what really changed from that sort of consultancy and how computing started with very linear programs, starting at the beginning, ending at the bottom. It was all that sort of object orientation, the fourth generation language, event-driven coding that started to allow us, and the visual side of programming as well, that enabled us to start doing prototyping. So instead of specifying something and then saying, right, it needs to do this, we then write it and it gets to the end and it does this. Instead of that, it was a case of, this is what I did. I stood in front of audiences. We looked at a basic computer screen, and the customer or the client was able to sort of say, well, what if we did this? What if we did this? And in real time, I'd be able to drag little input boxes or buttons and do tiny bits of event code that will actually enable things to drag together. So it was that era of prototyping, and I think that's really, in my view, where Agile came in as well. So we went from being a very linear industry to being a prototyping, rapid application development industry, iterative industry, where we're able to refine and improve things over time. And it's interesting because I think Agile was actually introduced in 2001. So that's 20 years ago. But indeed, we've actually, it took a little while to get a little bit more momentum. But when we look at where we are today, absolutely, that whole iterative response drives perfectly into the world of product ownership. It's no more a project plan going from one stage to another that can be tracked. It's very much that iterative, that ownership, that communication. What do we do next? How do we actually get the next change in? And that ownership starts to build up, working with business and with technology to evolve the product. And I think that's a very interesting way that things have developed. If I'm honest, I don't really know when the word product came to mind. We just started reusing code that we'd built, and suddenly that code was getting bigger and we gave it a name, but was that when product was delivered or invented? I don't know. It's just, around that time. But iterative and linear, that very much was the difference in my book. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, because the technology moving to iterative methodologies, with the technology allowing you to do that, you're effectively co-creating the solution. What you've described there, you're co-creating the solution with the customer. So it's almost like that's quite insightful way of describing it.
In a way, we've actually slowed down now, because in those days it literally was literally draw boxes on screen while you were standing in front of an audience, and try to design screens for data input or navigation. And literally we could with tools such as Visual Basic and those sorts of visual editors that started to come out in those days, that was what was possible. Of course, you would end up with a prototype that had to be, sort of industrialized afterwards. But it was that whole product ownership, that product growth, that communication with the stakeholders that were going to be the users of this system or the beneficiaries of the system. And that, to me, really encompasses the whole of product in one step. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Very insightful. If we shift gears a little bit and talk about prioritization. So this is something I have seen several leaders struggle with, this, the ability to just prioritize in a sensible manner. So you've put out an article a few months ago now, just nice and simple, providing a template of how you can prioritize. And I think it'd be good for our audience to just, if you could talk through that. Is there anything you can advise on prioritization, why it's a challenge? And this is central to the role of a product owner as well, because they are the channel of communication. Everything seems to come to them. And when it comes to prioritization, they're right in the middle of everything when it's time to prioritize.
Yeah, well, look, prioritization, I think, is the biggest challenge there is, because let's face it, a stakeholder, even if you've just got a sales, let's say the head of sales versus the director of finance. I mean, the finance director is typically about cutting costs, and the sales guy is all about spending money. So how are these guys ever going to have the same priorities? But of course, I'm making the extreme to make a point. But in reality, those challenges are absolutely at the top, at the board, where there are differences of opinion and what's necessary around the business, and obviously those things need to drive into the product. And I remember the article you're referring to. I mean, that was really on a particular example where I had exactly that problem. We had so many board members that just had completely differing views of where the product should be going, what we should be prioritizing first, how we would actually, sort of move this forward. And we were at an absolute stalemate. And the easiest way to actually resolve that was that we put a tiny little spreadsheet together. It was tiny, literally a column for each of the stakeholders and a row for each of the actual ideas or the pieces of work. What should we prioritize? And we just got them to order it 1 to 10 by putting their number in between 1 to 10. And you can imagine the simplistic maths there. By adding up the numbers across the rows, we can see collectively how we would actually sort of come to a prioritization across the board. Now, the most important thing here was not necessarily the actual mechanism. It was about communicating to the audience the problems, and it was about everybody understanding that this was probably one of the easiest ways to solve the problem. And you had to get buy-in for this whole process before we actually made them do it. It was almost, yes, I agree, and as a board should do, what happens in the boardroom, whatever happens, discussions go in the boardroom, challenges, you come out with a group decision, and that must be the decision, and you all support it. And so getting that buy-in was, sort of fundamental before doing the exercise. I will say the exercise worked, and I was very lucky. There was a quote from the CEO a few weeks later. And the quote was, "You've actually done more in 2 weeks than this company's achieved in 2 years." And it was all about just being able to, sort of get some sense into some of these people and have a simplistic mechanism that enabled us to all move forward in an agreed way as one, really. Yeah.
I think really insight, and it's good that process works as well. What I'll do, just for the benefit of the audience and for you as well, I'll put the link to the article in the show notes, so people can get to
it's a very simple article. I remember.
Exactly, it's very simple but straight to the point. Given the nature of the challenge, given the number of organizations that struggle with prioritization, I think it's worth reading. Just to say, don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, with prioritization, you've got to think that if a board, and I always use the word the board because it is led from the top. The top have to give the strategic direction. I'm not talking about the prioritization at the moment about sending a little speedboat off to the left or right to try something out. When you're steering a ship down the middle of the ocean, you've got to know where that ocean liner is actually going, because if you start trying to steer the ocean liner, you're in big trouble because you're steering off. You don't know where you're heading. And one of my other favorite phrases is what good looks like. And you must always have in your head what good looks like, so you know where that ocean line is actually targeted. And yes, it's absolutely valid. Trial and error. Let's send those little speedboats off the side. Some of them might sink, some of them might return with a brilliant idea, but effectively the ocean line is still going pretty much in that strategic direction, and you don't change that straight away. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, I think that's quite good. The importance of strategy. If we take this mindset of being a brilliant product owner, being focused on strategy, to some of the biggest challenges we have today. So there are loads of them, but I'll mention a few that are sort of topical right now. So the move away from fossil fuels is a big challenge. The world needs to do it. It's not really an option. We've got to do it. We've got to adopt new ways of working. I think the world's been forced to do it, and companies need to remain effective. Corporate culture needs to remain. Even if you don't see your colleagues for a year, you need to still feel part of a community to be effective. There are massive challenges the world faces. Supply chains being disrupted left, right, and center. These are big challenges, they're macro scale challenges. A lot of what we do as organizations tends to be looking downwards to us, but it's the same mindset that we can approach big challenges as well. So the question is there anything we can take from the mindset of being a product owner, product manager, to addressing these challenges? Once again, it's an open-ended question, but it would be good to start the conversation, see if there's a way of thinking, of joining the dots. Is there a different way of looking at these challenges?
Well, look, I think that's a really interesting challenge you've given me, because I think, if product management is all about communication, I think communication solves a lot of problems, whatever the scale. But, I also think, there's a part of the question is also perhaps around product being iterative and agile type, concepts of little changes towards the good. Well, I can see how that works in many of those examples, but if I'm actually sort of thinking about building a railway line between Edinburgh and London, or some such thing, I can't prototype the route. I can't lay a route, say that doesn't really work, so I'll change it. So I think you have to be very pragmatic about the project itself. I say project or the problem. But I do think that with a lot of these bigger issues we have, it is the small steps, it's the small changes, and that is iteration, and that is the same sort of principles as agile. And to make agile work, you need those product owners that are actually sort of taking those little bits forward, that are running those little projects that actually make the big project itself start to turn in the right direction. I would, so I don't think necessarily there is a direct correlation with product management that I deal with day by day, but I do think the concept of agile and the agility, the iteration, the whole way we deliver software these days can certainly be applied to many of the world problems that we have. The huge world scale issues. When you think of the COVID pandemic, and you think, well, we have had iterations of, does this work? Does that work? Whether it's face masks, whether it's not face masks, whether it's actually a lockdown, whether it's actually this vaccine or that vaccine, we have effectively been doing agile, be it on a global larger scale, and there have been people that are coordinating that. So if you want to call those product people, then indeed I can see the similarities between world scale problems being solved iteratively, and the world that I certainly live in the world of product.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is communication, iteration are really key to almost any challenge we face, whether it's it's a small project, it's one of the small speedboats you're referring to, it's the ocean liner, or it's the ocean itself.
Yes, that's true. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think you've been very, like you said, you've been very fortunate to be able to work with different kind of challenges, small scale, all the way technology, business stakeholders, customers. If you had the opportunity to speak to somebody who just wants to get started in product management today, they face a different world from when you started. But given all the experience you have, given the knowledge you have now, is there any advice you give anyone looking to get started to become a product owner, product manager?
Oh goodness. Well, I mean, first of all, I would say I love product. That is my world, and I think probably the one thing that I would say is you have to love the product you're working on, because I just think that you have to have that passion. You have to have that drive. You want success so much for that product that you're responsible for. That is a huge part of being a successful product owner or product manager. Yes, there are the technology things, the knowledge, the business acumen, experience in so many different methodologies, so you can sort of decide on how you're actually going to actually look at a particular problem. And add to that, of course, be a good listener, because so often people are so wanting to give their point of view that they don't necessarily sit and listen. So I think, for me, you have to love the product you are working on. That is an absolute no-brainer, because that just drives everything about it, everything that you actually choose to do as a product owner. Love the technology, love the business, be a good listener, and develop those speaking skills as well, so that you can communicate well with others. I think other than that, it comes down to what we were first saying about experience, and it's worth just immersing yourself in anything you can that is product related, whether that's learning about agile, whether that's learning about different pieces of technology, or being interested in the latest devices that come out, or UX traits. You just have to consume information and consume it from every channel you can, and learn from others. There's just so much, but it comes down to, you have to be passionate about the product you are looking after, and you want to drive it forward, and that's the number one thing for me. Yeah.
So you have to be passionate. Yeah, nothing like that. So you need a passionate attitude. It's not really the aptitude. It's not what you know, what you've learned. It's you need to be passionate about it. That's brilliant. I think
That's right.
And when I think of basically what you're saying, that makes sense. When I think of the product owners that I refer to as being brilliant or being good, that I've worked with, they come from different backgrounds, but there is something consistent. It's the attitude. As in, the only thing I could pick consistent was attitude, not necessarily what they knew or where they come from or background or experience. It was really attitude. So I think that makes a lot of sense. They need to love what they're doing to be successful in that role. That's very insightful.
Sure.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for a lot of insights there. Before we close, it would be good to a little bit more about you. Any final words? What you're doing? How people can contact you as well. It would be good to just let you share any final thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, well, as I say, I'm so fortunate. I have bounced around a little bit between industries, vertical markets, big companies, small companies, and I'm just closing down a particular chapter in my life. Developing card payment technologies, and that's actually opened up another opportunity for me, moving into another payment provider to start developing solutions around that for a larger organisation. But I mean, my LinkedIn is always the best place to find me. So I know, Babatope, you said about putting the link to the article. That article, I believe, is on LinkedIn. So I'm sure people can find me through that. That's the best way. And just contact me through a message on LinkedIn. That'd be great to hear people.
Perfect. I'll put your contact in the show notes as well. Jonathan, this has been a brilliant conversation. A lot of golden nuggets of insight there. So thank you very much for that. And looking forward to staying in touch. And probably we might have to bring you back for more insights as well.
That'd be great. That would be great. All right. Thank you very much, Babatope. It's been great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care.
Good night.
Would you like to learn more about the role of product owners in leading change? Would you like to join in the conversation on the role product owners play in the modern organization? Connect with a community of like-minded leaders on our website, thechangelead.com. When you visit our site, click Join to join the community. Check out the show notes for details on how you can contact today's guests. Also, please don't forget to like, comment, review, and subscribe. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Have a great week and see you next time.